quorum present, so I will go ahead and read the notice. Good afternoon, everybody. Notice of a public meeting of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville pursuant to Chapter 551, Title 5 of the Texas Government Code, the Texas Open Meetings Act, is hereby given that the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, in accordance with Article 5, Section 12 of the Charter of said city, will convene a special meeting on Tuesday, July the 30th, 2019, at 5 p.m. in the Commission Chambers on the second floor of Brownsville City Hall, Old Federal Building, located at 1001 East Elizabeth Street, Brownsville, Cameron County, Texas. We will begin with the invocation. Everybody would please stand.
And please, please remain standing for the pledge afterwards. Father God, we thank you so much for the city of Brownsville, the many opportunities that we have here. Lord God, you know the things that are on the agenda tonight even better than we do. And so, Lord God, we ask for your wisdom and direction on our mayor and our city commissioners and everyone who presents anything tonight. And Lord, we ask that the outcome be the best for the city of Brownsville. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. I will read the executive session items. Consultation with attorney to receive confidential legal advice pursuant to Section 551.0712 of the Texas Government Code on a matter related to the implementation of the Texas Local Government Code 501.073 to operations of the Greater Brownsville Incentives Corporation, in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter. Executive Session B, consultation with attorney to receive confidential legal advice pursuant to Section 551.0712 of the Texas Government Code on a matter related to the reinstatement or creation, structure, operation, and interaction of the Audit and Oversight Committee and the Internal Auditor's Office, where the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter.
I move that we move into executive session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you. Oh, okay. Okay, we'll now reconvene from the executive session. Next item is work session, right?
Next, we have a work session, storm and water drainage.
Honorable Commissioners, Mr. David Icon is going to present on give it a short presentation on the stormwater drainage forum that we're holding on Thursday. I'm very proud of David because he's pretty much the one that set this whole thing up, and he's reached out to a lot of people and hopefully get good things done. So, Mr. David Icon, the engineering department.
Good evening. Like Mr. Lassa said, it's a really short presentation today. And we basically want to present this so that there's dispel any of the confusion that may have been around this drainage forum and answer any questions that you may have before we get into it on Thursday. So the goal of this drainage forum really was for collaboration between the local, state, and federal partners that maybe have or haven't had the same collaboration in the past. This is actually the brainchild of about a 2-year project that we've been kind of working in contact with FEMA, USGS, the Corps of Engineers, and we finally were able to bring them all into the same room, which is a big feat in itself. And we've been able to meet with them three different times in the past year. So this is kind of they kind of put this forward to say, hey, let's come down all together and kind of show that support that the city's been doing their side, their due diligence to try to get us at the table. Now let's present it for you and kind of show what we can do in the aftermath of that. So that's kind of the history of how it kind of came to be where we're at today. The target really is going to be for stakeholders that have, for drainage and stormwater. It's not quite open to the public quite yet, because we still want to have some discussions to finalize some projects before we present it to the public and say, this is the way we're moving forward. So the speakers, as I mentioned before, it's the Corps of Engineers, FEMA, UTRGV, USGS, and of course the city will have, be the host of it and have some conversation of that as well. The event information is going to be Thursday. It's just in the afternoon, 1 to 5. And the location is going to be at the Brownsville Event Center. Now, there is also going to be an executive session during lunch, which you all are welcome to join us for the delegates and the legislation to kind of speak their part of what's kind of happened in the last legislative session. And the last portion I'm going to put on there is the next step is going to be community drainage reports or form, whatever we've had. We've had it in the past. Commissioner Gowan kind of led it a couple of years ago where we had that drainage report for the city. And we are wanting to move in that direction to where we can present this to the public. We just want to be at a more concrete place on projects, because they don't want to hear talk as much as how are we moving forward? Is money allocated? Who's going to help do this? And when are they going to get it done? So the agenda that we're going to have, it's pretty short. The speakers are kind of going to keep it to a 20-minute minimum, because I know that after you speak about water for so long, you start glazing over. So we kept it really short and to the point so that we can get the most benefit out of this forum and answer any questions local stakeholders may have for these agencies that are graciously coming down to visit us. And that's all I have. Any questions?
When you said 20 minutes, I thought you were going to like pull out a presentation for 20 minutes, and I thought,
No.
oh boy.
No.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Thank you very much.
Next, we have consent agenda items A through C.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Next, we have the public comment period. The first one we have of it up is Mr. Eugene Fernandez. Would you please come up? Okay, we'll move on to this next one is Mr. Enrique Melguizo.
Good evening. I came here today because there's a lot of misinformation going around town on the name change of East Fronton Street to McNair Family Drive. I have done a lot of homework. I can guarantee you that one of the issues is that it's going to cost a lot of money to change names of the different households or businesses. There's not one agency, federal, state, nor county, nor municipal, that charges money for a street name change. So that's out. I also want to let you know that as soon as the name changed, I went household to household, telling the people there that I would be willing to help them do any change wherever they needed to apply. And their main concern was PUB. I called PUB 3 times, and then I said, I'm going to have to do this 100 times. I'd rather go to PUB and see if they can work with their computer and just change for all of their accounts. They can do it. I did the same thing for the San Benito appraisal district. They're going to do it, okay? And there's things that have to change. Yeah, nobody likes change, okay? Or a lot of people don't like change, but it's for a good cause. Every time I was walking up and down the street, I never heard a complaint about the name or the family's name. It's about the change and the misunderstanding that it's going to cost a lot of money in my business. No, that's not the case. Okay? I just wanted to set the record straight. Are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Don Clapper.
I want to talk about something that's near and dear to our new mayor's heart, preservation of historic homes. I know you love them. So do I. I ran an article on Facebook a few weeks ago about GBIC, and I put a picture of the beautiful old historic home that they're headquartered in. And it got a lot of feedback from people. But unfortunately, it got some negative feedback from a lady. I don't know, she said she'd try to be here. Janet Wells Ramirez, did she make it? No, she hadn't made it? Okay. Her family ancestral home has been allowed to rot and fall apart, literally. And unfortunately, I found out that it's owned by a prominent dentist on South Padre Island who has the money to do the repairs if she wants to. But she's let it fall apart and rented it out as a slumlord property. This is not what historic homes were meant to be. This home is at 333 East Adams Street. And I called the city. In fact, I went down and I talked to Ms. Ana Hernandez, Assistant Director of the Planning and Development Department, and she sent out an inspector, and they've condemned the house. They've condemned the house, and they're issued citations for this woman to go to court about it. And on top of that, you were just talking about drainage. This house is in such bad shape that it's rotted away, and parts of it have actually ended up down in the city storm sewer. This is something nobody wants. This is not, the purpose of historic homes is preservation, not deterioration. And this house has been allowed to deteriorate, and that's something that should never happen. I guess it's too late to do anything about this once beautiful old home that's now a historic pile of rubble. But I would like a city ordinance passed requiring that these homes be inspected once a year to make sure this never happens again. We want these homes preserved, not falling apart, stopping up our city drainage. I don't think anybody wants that to happen. So I'm asking the city to please pass an ordinance requiring an annual inspection of all these homes. Ana Hernandez said she thought it was a wonderful idea, and she thought it would help solve a lot of the problems that they have in the city department with these homes. She says they have constant problems with these homes, and they have to remove them from they're supposed to be exempt from property taxes, but they have to remove them and tax them because they haven't taken care of them. That's all I want to say, but I hope that somebody will lead, if the city will get an ordinance passed to get rid of this problem. This
Just to
shouldn't
share a
happen.
fun fact with you, Miss Janet, whose home that belongs to, they were cleaning out the home a few summers ago, and she found this police badge, and it was, I want to say, number 5. It was the 5th police badge ever issued out from the Brownsville Police Department from the 1800s. So hopefully we can get a picture of that up here in City Hall.
Can we please have an ordinance? And if you do pass an ordinance for annual inspection, I'd like it to be named after this historic old home that's been allowed to fall apart, the Tiarina Historic Home.
Thank you,
I'd like
Mr.
it to
Klepper.
be named the Tiarina Historic Home Ordinance, Preservation Ordinance.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Mr. Ernesto Hernandez.
Hello, Mayor, City Commissioners. My name is Juan René Hernandez, Ernesto's son. I'm here as a property owner and representative of the residents opposing the name change from East Fronton to McNair Family Drive. We, the residents of East Fronton Street, do not agree on the name change to McNair Family Drive and are reaching out to the City of Brownsville and the City Commissioners to reconsider, reverse, and reinstate the East Fronton Street name. We are asking for your assistance in the preservation of history, legacy of East Fronton Street for the past and future generations. The residents of East Fronton Street want their beloved street name and its history back. The City of Brownsville currently and on May 23rd lacked the proper protocol and guidelines to evaluate and process the name change of a street. Additionally, the information provided with the request to change the name of the street by interested parties was and is not representative of the majority of the current residents and property owners' will, position, and acceptance on the matter. Because of the lack of proper guidelines and misleading information, the decision was made without considering the actual facts, thus failed to evaluate the loss of historical, cultural, and civic value, the impact and importance that the name change represents. The lack of protocol and guidelines did not take into account the economic hardship, administrative inconvenience in changing driver's license, federal permits, federal records, the loss in time and money informing vendors and customers, the logistics inconvenience and disruption of cash flow to some of the businesses on East Fronton Street. We, the residents, businesses, and other property owners of the East Fronton Street, do hereby request the reinstatement of our street to East Fronton Street for the following reasons. The will and the desire of the residents, business, and property owners to preserve the name of the street because of administrative, economic, logistic, and hardships that they will endure because of the change. But if that's not enough, then we appeal to you, as you all like to preserve, or we're here for the preservation, as the gentleman here said. Reconsider on the grounds of preservation of the legacy and history of the City of Brownsville and East Fronton Street. Some of you may not know this, but East Fronton Street is rich in history. It was one of the first streets in the original town site, and supporting documentation of 1850 will demonstrate that we sent you guys. Meaning East Fronton Street was one of the first streets in Bronzeville and is about 169 years old. East Fronton Street is also the only street in the original town site that is in Spanish, Fronton, meaning making it pretty significant and unique if you ask me. Not only that, but East Fronton Street was home to the Afro-American community of Brownsville in the 1800s up until 1950 when segregation ended. Home to specifically Anita Pullman, if you guys know, a woman of color from whom the Brownsville Independent School District recognized and named a school after her for her work and dedication to the Brownsville youths as a teacher. And where do you think she practiced her profession and lived? None other than East Fronton Street. Furthermore, historical maps of Brownsville dating back to 1889 show Fronton Street as the city limits southeast side of the city.
Time.
When the St. Louis, Brownsville, and Mexico Railway built their rail yard in the late 1800s, early 1910. East Fronton Street played an important role in the development and growth of the city. This became an industrial hub and a warehouse district for the city of Brownsville. East Fronton Street is part of the historical freight depot and warehouse district of the city of Brownsville, also known as the St. Louis, Brownsville, Mexico Railway Company.
Mr.
and
Hernandez,
freight
I'm
depot.
sorry, you're out of
And then
time.
I'm just going to end this right here. This historic district, it gained the recognition by the Texas Historical Commission, so it's considered a historic site. So we have nothing against the McNair family. They already have a park named after them. The St. Charles Park was named the McNair Family Park. So I just don't want you guys to set a precedence in order that it'll change other historical neighborhoods, start renaming their historical streets or changing the historical streets. This is a very old street, and I think you guys should take into consideration and
I understand. Thank you, sir.
yeah. Thank you
Thanks.
guys. Sorry for going over.
Mayor, I would ask that this item be brought back at the next meeting.
Mr. Neese, we can't hear you.
I'm asking that based on the materials that were provided and the discussion, that this item be brought back or brought on the table for the next meeting. It should be an item to be considered.
We can bring it back, I guess, as long as there's a couple commissioners that request the item.
I think it's possible, when there's a public comment, we can ask that it be set
No,
on
I'll
the
second
agenda?
you if that's what's necessary.
Okay, well
Wait, I
then,
don't know if
We
that's
cannot
on the
take any
agenda.
action during public comment period.
Right, just for a future
okay.
meeting.
I believe there's item 10 kind of brings up some of the points that you're making in regards to formalizing a
Well,
process and
that's
policy.
a separate issue. That's passing the policy.
Right, 10 has to
Okay.
do with the policy itself. What Mr. Neese is asking
What I'm
is,
asking is that reconsideration be brought back, and if I'm not mistaken, you can do it right after public comment. If somebody has an issue brought up, that the commission can put it on the agenda for the next item.
next
And
meeting?
At the next meeting, yes.
Sure, okay.
We'll look into it.
And if not, if you look into it, if not, then I have a second for that.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Next, we have items for individual consideration. Action item number 3, discussion, consideration, and possible action to remove Commissioner Jessica Tetro from the Greater Brownsville Incentives Corporation Board of Directors, which is JIVIC, pursuant to Section 5, subsection C of the City of Brownsville Policy on Board and Commission Member Appointment and Eligibility, and appoint her replacement.
So I'm happy to tell the public that my GBIC exit was already planned for the end of July. Those of you that don't know, I'm a mother of 3 children, and my middle daughter, Abigail, when she was born, this beautiful, beautiful baby, and the first thing they do to the baby is lift up the stethoscope onto the heart. And I could tell from the nurse's reaction, it was just not, her eyes opened and picked up the phone from the other side of the nursery. And that's when we knew that she had a heart issue. And so this heart issue has been very, very quiet for 12 years. She's been getting her checkups, but I have to report very shortly after my election, we were in our living room, and my daughter, started turning blue and passed out. And so immediately we take her to her heart appointment, and she has issues and is going to be needing a stent placed in her heart. We don't know when it's going to happen, but because of this, my time is dedicated to my district and to my daughter. My district is my family, but my daughter's health comes first, and that means I have to cut back on my other obligations to the city, and one being GBIC. And I really want to thank the public for their understanding and knowing that I have given my life to the city of Brownsville, but I'm also a mother. And I hope you understand when I say that I would never wish this on anybody else, to have a child that has something wrong with the one thing that gives them life. And it's out of my control, it's out of my hands, but she's in good hands, doctors at Driscoll. And we're very we're faith-based, and because of this, my legacy at GBIC to change and bring better structure so that it's a board that receives $5 million and works for everybody, not just the select few people who control the monies at that board, but rather that it be something that brings opportunity and hope to everybody here in Brownsville. So I'm very proud of the work we've done on GBIC. I am very proud of all of the things that we've been able to do and all of the change we've made. We've brought SpaceX, we have brought CK Technologies, Greyhound Bus, SATA, so many things alongside Commissioner Cowan and Commissioner Galansky. But because of that, my time has been cut back on GBIC. And although my absences were excused because of my family emergency, I have no choice but to resign. It was in motion already. I had made it known to the city commissioners and to the city staff because they've been following very closely with my daughter's issues. And it's unfortunate that it got placed on the agenda, but I really want to thank you for your understanding and knowing that I have to get that stent placed into my daughter's heart when she needs it, because as parents, we all understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Council, now, if Commissioner Tetro submitted her resignation, that now allows for an appointment to the board?
Correct.
I'll entertain any motions for, I know that Commissioner Neese has made a nomination. I've made a nomination. I believe Commissioner Munguia
I have one there.
has. So I'll entertain any motions from considering appointments.
Or sorry, who are the eligible?
May I get a clarification? Her resignation is effective immediately?
My understanding that I did speak to someone at GBIC who confirmed that they received a letter. I'm not sure if it's immediate, but I know that she tendered her resignation already.
So subject to
the
resignation.
The openings, there is an opening.
Correct.
One thing that I'm gonna ask, so that would be my spot that opened, I would ask, I don't see any of the districts that are represented. I don't believe any of them live in District 2, and I don't see an applicant from District 2. I would ask the board if you could hold it open for a District 2 applicant. I know in the next meeting that we are going to be opening the GBIC board for 7 members, and I don't see any scheduling or conflicting issues now that we have a full board in place. So I would ask that maybe you could make a motion to table.
Well, I think,
If we're even on that, no, right, it's moot.
I think we can consider
Can we
somebody
consider
from
it?
that district, but I think it's ripe for appointment if somebody wants to. We have applicants, correct?
Yes, we have a formal motion on the table to
Okay.
fill the vacancy.
I'll nominate-
If Commissioner's amending and making another motion, we don't have a second on either one, so.
I'll make the motion to table.
We have a motion to table
Second.
and a second. Any discussion on that? Those in favor?
Aye?
Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make the motion to appoint Carlos Guerrero.
We have a motion to appoint Carlos Guerrero. Do I have a second?
Okay, so
Okay.
you don't give me my appointment either, all right?
Any other motions?
I'll second Commissioner Petron.
Okay, we have a motion to appoint Carlos Guerrero and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye?
Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion fails. Do we have any other motions?
I'll make a motion to appoint Erasmo Castro.
We have a motion to appoint Erasmo Castro. Do I have a second? Okay, no seconds.
I guess you see who your friends are.
I move to appoint Nick Schaefer.
I'll second.
We have a motion to appoint Nick Schaefer and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay?
Okay. Motion would carry, council?
I counted three votes only.
I did too.
Do we need 4?
Yes.
I would vote for Mr. Schaefer then.
Okay. Motion passed.
Motion would
passed
carry?
with a vote.
Okay. Do we have any, there's no other vacancies then at this time, correct? Okay.
Next, we have action item number 4, discussion, consideration, possible action to reinstate the Audit and Oversight Committee with parameters of structure, operation, and interaction with the Internal Auditor's Office.
I'll move that we reinstate the Audit and Oversight Committee, subject to approval of bylaws that will be created by that group and later approved by, hopefully approved by the City Commission.
So there would be no action or any action or any audits taking place until the bylaws are in place?
The committee, well, Commissioner Galansky, just to clarify, you're asking for the Audit and Oversight Committee to be reinstated and then for the committee to actually formulate bylaws and bring those bylaws to the commission?
Correct.
Okay, and the committee for now would exist for the purpose of the bylaws, and then, actually, once the bylaws are done, then they can start
Correct.
operation? Okay.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
Next, we have action item number 5, consideration and possible action to adopt policies and procedures for Internal Auditor's Office.
So Mayor and Commission members, yes. So this item is a management recommendation for the Internal Auditor's Office to have the structure that we have been recommended that be adopted. So there was an external audit last fall done by a third-party auditor. Part of that involved us making sure that the Internal Auditor's Office had the right level of independence and objectivity, and that's what the committee that you just adopted would do. We have created policies and procedures for your consideration. We hadn't submitted that to the commission, so I would say that today would be too premature to have those adopted, but if it could be tabled for the next meeting, we'll make sure that we have those, make those documents available to you for the next meeting. But it does coincide with the Audit and Oversight Committee. Essentially, the Internal Auditor's Office will not report to the city manager, but instead to the committee. That is part of the policies and procedures. We've worked on those, but we would like for you to review and consider and provide feedback.
So then just to clarify, the intent would be for the Internal Auditor's Office to report to the new Audit and Oversight Committee?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay.
Functionally, it reports to the Audit and Oversight Committee. Day-to-day, it reports to the city manager, but that's just for the sake of having some structure. But ultimately, it's accountable fully to the committee.
In that new office, would that require hiring an internal auditor, posting the position, and
That is correct.
Okay.
And in the bylaws that the committee will create, that will be addressed in there. And so
Okay.
once those bylaws are created, then we can proceed with posting for the position, then the committee can evaluate candidates and
what would be the
Get that.
timetable then for the policies and procedures to come back to the commission?
this would be the next meeting.
Okay.
Since it's tabled procedurally, we have to come back to the next meeting. I'll have those emailed to you all. We also have a working template for the bylaws piece. So you'll get the bylaws piece, you'll get the policies and procedures. During this next 2 weeks, actually next week, you can send us any feedback that you have, and then we can make sure that we get that completed.
Okay. Do I have any motions?
I'll move to table it.
We have a motion to
until the
table.
next meeting.
Do I have a second? Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Did
Nope.
we, I'm sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt.
sure.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, this is
I had
discussion.
too much coffee.
It's okay.
Did we appoint members to the audit committee?
Not yet.
Okay.
Is there a recommendation as to when to do that? I mean, I can go ahead and do that. Do I need to do that in an open meeting, or can I submit that to?
I don't think that was properly noticed, Mayor, so
Oh,
I would
okay.
Okay,
suggest.
well,
Okay.
wait, sorry.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion?
I have a discussion on what you just discussed. There's no prohibition, or there's nothing in place that says he cannot just appoint and send an email to whoever he wants, is there?
Well,
I
yes,
mean,
in
when-
this regard,
when
I
you-
believe the structure is going to be that they're going to be appointed by the mayor. I don't know what, and they're all going to be members of the commission. It could be done like that, Commissioner. I just
So-
don't
so
think we
the
can vote on
committee's
something
been-
that is not properly noticed. That's
But it
my
was
answer.
properly noticed to form the committee, which implies there needs to be members, and the mayor can appoint the members. There's
Right.
nothing saying that he can't.
Right, we wouldn't have to bring it to the commission, but it's something the mayor could do
By
on his
appointment.
own, correct.
Sure, I can go ahead and do that. I'll submit it to city manager's office. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. We had some discussion. Any additional discussion?
Nope.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Thank you.
Next, we have action item number 6, consideration action to approve an amendment to planning consultant services contract with Friesen Nichols Incorporated.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. We brought to you in April the approval of a contract for planning consulting services with a cap of $34,000. We're going to quickly exceed that cap because we do have an interim planning and redevelopment services director to assist us through the transition of rewriting our codes, trying to do streamlined permit process, and just really looking at all our procedures and way we can improve the department and our services. So part of that would include extending that limit out in terms of removing the not to exceed of $34,000, and then we would go more of a scope of services of work. The first being interim planning and redevelopment director, and if we were to do a downtown plan or other specific work, scopes of work, we would bring that to you. Okay? But right now, it's removing of the cap and allowing for additional interim planning and redevelopment consultant services with the director, Don
Okay.
Warwick.
So is there going to be any sort of monetary limits on that, or blank check? What
Yes,
are we
sir.
talking about?
I'm gonna.
Thank you.
So if you look on the second handout, it does speak to specific scope related to this first task order, which is number 1. We have also, if you look at the contract that was approved and stamped by the purchasing department, the fee schedule had a minimum and a maximum, so there was a range. And what I've asked them to do is tighten up that range and give an hourly rate. And so rather than a minimum and maximum, we were saying we would really need to hone in on that maximum that we're going to be charged. So on page A5 of the purchasing contract, that has a min and max. And the amendment, if you look on the back page of the amendment under compensation, we see an hourly rate, which is less than the maximum. So what we did is negotiated a reduction in the hourly rate and identification of the hourly rate of the interim services planning director. Because as you know, we have already announced the job, and so what we need is just to have a little bit more bandwidth until we hire that new director position. That director position was posted, I believe, last week, and so we just need to have those interim services until such time that we hire a new director.
Do you have any idea on a proposed timetable for maybe getting that director in?
What I can say is that we're actively recruiting. We're on the planning website, Texas Municipal League website, recruiting through colleagues and processes. So our job is to get someone, the best qualified candidate here as soon as possible. So we're actively going to conferences, talking, calling people to get that, because we understand that what we wouldn't do is hire the right person, get them in here, but also continue the work that we've done. We've talked about short-term wins in terms of code rewrite. We want to continue that process. She's also evaluating our processes with her 20-some years of experience. Dawn Warwick is evaluating current processes. So what we don't want to do is kind of wait in this stage and not progress, but continue to progress with her experience while we find the right candidate. But our goal, of course, through the city manager's office and executive team, is to hire someone, the best qualified candidate, as soon as possible. Absolutely.
May I just ask a question of clarification? She's on site now?
Yes.
Okay.
Dawn, if you'd like to come up
Okay.
here, she is on site and she's attending. Now, right now, it is 35 hours a week, so that we're, maximum of 35 hours a week. But if you would like to speak, have her speak to her experience, we can have her do that as well.
And so I'm just curious, in the second tab, let me see, where it says that she would start July 8th to October 25th, is that the period that you're thinking it would require? And is it for that amount then? I'm just for the top two paragraphs on the back of the page.
Well, I think that's the maximum we can, if we have an interim director, if we have a director, we can
Onboard them.
notify them as soon as possible that the services are no longer required. It does speak to July 30th because the $34,000 contract that we had will take us through pretty much the 30th, but we need an extension. We need more bandwidth to be able to pay additional hourly services.
I have a question on the fee schedule. You're switching from the one on page 2 to the one toward the end, you're saying?
So on the existing one, A5, which is here, there's a range.
Yes.
You see, and so what we're doing is switching from that one
To the fixed,
to a fixed.
which is the back of page 1.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
page
back
2.
of this.
Yeah. Yes, okay. So you're switching to that.
Right, rather than having a maximum.
Yeah, because the range was
Yeah,
a
the
little bit,
range.
yeah, okay.
So what I asked them to do, so rather than a range that was a larger range, we're honing in on a
Fixed,
fixed hourly fee, which is less than the maximum of the range.
yes.
Okay, so.
Then the 150,000 here on that page, what is that alluding to? Or in the second tab at the back of the page?
Right, that's on compensation estimate?
Yes.
Is that inclusive of the money that's already been spent, the 34? So are you amending the original 34 or whatever it was now to 150?
The amendment, I think the amendment should only be a not to exceed, what we're taking out is the not to exceed amount. And I think what we're gonna do is, depending on, say the director is here on for another month, well, the extension is only gonna be up to that additional number of days that we need. And whether it's 30 days or 45 days, we're not gonna pay more than the services we need for an interim planning director. It's hard for me to tell you exactly what it is. we believe that by October we'll have someone, because that's such a longer period of time. But I don't know exactly, if it'll be until October, or it may be next month we might have a director in place. So we just want to be able to give ourselves bandwidth to do that.
I understand that, but I'm not sure if Commissioner Kalansky's question is being answered yet. I think she's asking what that number's for, and if that's specifically for this particular position for that 3.5 months, or is it for the other work that Friesen Nichols is doing as well?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Galansky,
On
could you
the
tell me?
second tab at the
Oh,
back.
yes.
So I'm just saying, is that the ceiling, 150,000?
Right, we anticipate if we were to use her services for 35 hours, including hotel, flight, everything, if I were to use it all the way up to October 25th, it may reach that amount. However, we're hoping that it will not get to that point, because we're planning to hire someone. But yes, that would be for that scope of services, including all of the compensation.
While I recognize and that, yes, you've exceeded the 34, you're getting close to it, and you don't want to have to keep coming back. I do believe in ceilings, though. If you need to come back at a certain time, at least that's my opinion, we should authorize up to a certain amount, and then if you need to come back, then, so.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I can come back if, what I would also say is that some of these scopes, such as the code rewrite, we're incorporating in her, since she's here at 35 hours a week, we are incorporating some of the scopes of services that we had for our code rewrite budget has been reduced, because she's able to integrate that in her daily work, because it's the same planning consulting firm. So there's some synergy there, and that's why what I've done is kind of tighten it up as much as possible, reduce the scope for the code rewrite, because she can advance in some of that now. In fact, we've been talking to some of our developers about what those code changes should be with respect to historic preservation.
I have just one comment. Next Tuesday, the commission will have an item where 2 subcommittees of the commission will be appointed. Those committees are going to start to delve deeper into the scope of work. That's part of the Friesen Nichols scope of work, but we had not acted on that because of the timeline with the runoffs. So part of what we're going to do here is make sure that we minimize the cost of her services, but also enable, while she's here, enable us to start to gain ground on the scope of work that's been developed. Part of that involves working with the commission, so having her on the ground should reap benefits by reducing the costs we have on the overall scope of work. So it's kind of blended here. We want to contain costs on her professional services in terms of interim ED, but some of that involves some of the code rewrite work that we have in the scope of work overall. So we're trying to find ways to not just save from her presence, but also on the scope of work costs that she could do while she'll be on the ground. So there's like a little intermingling of costs
So
there.
in layman's terms, you're saying that she's starting now on the permitting, on
Correct.
standardizing the permitting process. Okay.
Correct, and she's going to start working hands-on with the commission members once we appoint the subcommittees next Tuesday. That's on the agenda for next Tuesday. And that had been stalled because we needed to wait for the elections to occur.
I have a question on the last page, or the last paragraph of that page 2. So it says if non-FNI employees do resident representative services or do CAD services in their workspace, that we have to pay them double what the cost is for the non-employees?
And I don't anticipate that she would be doing CAD services, but we can, if there's anything in the scope that you would like to change, we can definitely change that. And I have no problem.
Well, is that right? Is that correct? In other words, to me, it seems like I have my facility, but I'm going to have some other guy come in and do the CAD work for me, but I'm going to charge the city double because he's using my workplace.
Commissioner Neese, where is that?
It's the last 2 sentences.
Which, the first tab?
Other direct expenses.
First tab?
Yeah, of the first, well, it's page 2.
Oh, okay.
The
All
one
right,
with
we
the
can,
fixed fee.
I can renegotiate that paragraph.
I mean,
But
if
yes,
they-
I mean, I guess it's,
If they want to charge for the, I guess, the rental of their workspace for the outside employee or non-employee, then that's one thing, but paying them double.
But that's not non-Freeze and Nichols employee. In this case,
Yeah.
the employee is a Freeze and Nichols employee.
Okay, but from what I'm reading, if they call in, say they have to bring another CAD guy in, they get to charge us double what the cost is for that guy, and they're basing it on the fact that they're using their
Right.
workspace.
Right, but that happens when it's a non-Freeze and Nichols employee. We have a Freeze and Nichols employee, so that's not applicable, and I could have that taken out to
Well,
use Freeze and Nichols employees.
That would be fine. That would
Okay.
be it.
So then, just to clarify, the way I'm understanding this is Dawn was already going to be doing some work on behalf of Freese and Nichols. Some of that scope of work that she was going to be doing for them at the same rates, or maybe at a slightly higher rate, she's now doing for the city, like in-house, correct? So some of the money that was allocated initially for her services outside is now being, in a way, redirected to the services she's doing in-house now, correct? Because
Yes.
the figure is really daunting, so I just want to make sure that
Right.
I'm understanding it correctly and making sure that some of this money was already going to be spent. It's just that it was going to be spent with her services outside. Am I correct?
Right, but what I'd like to clarify is we have a very intensive code rewrite that is, it takes more than just one person, and also this person's also looking at permitting processes improvements, which you'll find when you do your subcommittee. I mean, she was only going to be a small part of that whole, I mean, an important part, of course, but one part of that code rewrite. If we're rewriting the building code, I mean, not rewriting the building, we're adopting a building code with historic preservation amendments. We are overhauling our planning or unified development code, including form-based code. And then we're looking at our subdivision code, which is an engineering function, so with regard to plating. So it's a very comprehensive, that takes really more than a small hourly rate of one person. So it's really a team of Freese and Nichols employees that look at it. Is that somewhat reduced or streamlined by her presence? Yes, but it's a very large encompassing. I would say in the history of my over 20 years of career, I have done that once.
Yeah.
A complete overhaul.
Yeah.
And that's when I was working for the city of Hutto. We had a smart code or form-based code and the unified development code, and the city wanted it combined, not two codes, as a way to streamline. It took us about, I would say, and I used an outside consultant about 1.5 years. I mean, it was a great product. It worked really well, but I had a team of people and my assistant's expertise to do it.
It's quite an undertaking, but it's much needed. But one thing in my investigation and research that I wasn't aware of, but she might be, is there's an international existing building code that we don't have as part of, which might have solved a lot of our problems downtown. So, please feel free to review that one.
We've been discussing that one for about a month.
And to your point, absolutely, we did meet with, some of our experts in the community on that. We had a great meeting with Don and with Omar and our building and planning staff, and also going to include our fire marshal, because there are sprinkler standards and to consider. But it was a really good meeting because we talked about what's out there. We're also talking to the city of San Antonio, the cities of Tulsa, the city of New Orleans. I mean, all the different cities that kind of can speak to our scenario and what are the best practices. And there's a couple of things where sometimes when we're looking at adopting the 2015 code, which was a little bit more flexible than the 2012 International Building Code, and with that, you can also include certain amendments that make sense for your community.
Good.
Right? So you kind of tailor it to your needs in your city.
Well, she's got a lot of work cut out for her. Welcome aboard for that.
I have a question. You mentioned in your previous work experience, it took 1.5 years to do a rewrite. What do you anticipate here in this situation? Just initial
Well, I
estimation.
would say that because we want some short-term wins, some of the code rewrites will be come to you by the end of the year, at least to start. Some of the things like non-conforming uses and stuff we can do pretty quickly was part of the For the Love of Brownsville presentation. Some things that the residents had been asking for a while, carports, non-conforming uses. There's a list of them.
Mixed use.
Those can be brought quicker to show wins. Processes that we see that there's a problem, such as before our questions on planning went to the 546 helpline, and now we've actually have someone specifically, it goes directly to the planning department. Now we're looking to do that with the building inspections, because right now they call the 546 helpline. Well, it's better to have someone at the department to answer which type of inspection they need, because, if you don't know, and I'm the person answering the phone call, maybe I can speak to my building inspector and kind of give that service. So there's certain processes, improvements that we're doing now, but a whole rewrite does take about a year to do. A good one, a rewrite, and even then, I would say certain sections I had to tweak twice, like landscape ordinance. Sometimes you're tweaking it and you're checking to see how if they build it and you're saying it's not quite right, and maybe I have to right size it again. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, you definitely want a product that works for the city. So what I would say that even when we go through the code rewrite, there may be some tweaks that we still need to make, and commission, we may go to you and say, you know what, it wasn't quite right the first time, but we can improve it the second time. So it'll be a process.
And just a couple additional thoughts, Mayor, Commission. Back in March, when the commission adopted the budget amendment for $250,000, the comprehensive plan document, which is a 10-year plan now, this is essentially the guts of a comp plan. So when you implement a planning document, really the rubber meets the road when you look at your development regulations, your ordinances, and what we're doing here is a major surgery. And so the 150 that you see is really contained within the 250. And what we told the commission at the time was we're trying to maximize those dollars, because we're not going to recommend a full comp plan at this point, because the one that exists wasn't quite implemented by design. But it's what can we do that makes us functional? Because if a lot of the complaints, a lot of the concerns that I've heard from my interviews with you all and the community is planning. And part of the subcommission or the subcommittee process, the thought behind that is you won't fully appreciate how much needs to get done if you take a look under the hood, so to speak, until you start to sit down with the consultants, sit down with staff and see what's being done, because it's pretty extensive. But even so, we're not recommending to do a full-blown comp plan. We don't have time. There are some basic things that are getting in the way today of goals that the commission has, like downtown redevelopment and stuff like that, mixed use, that we couldn't do today. We couldn't do to help ourselves. It's just not in the cards for us because of our development processes. So we're further contained by our commitment to trying to use $250,000 and make miracles happen with regard to how much work it has to get done with true tangible improvements in terms of how developers will experience our development process. So, I mean, we're still committed to trying to find creative ways to make those fixes.
I just really think this cost will pay for itself multiple times over.
Oh, yeah.
Correct.
If we get going as soon as possible.
I think this
Right,
is the
and in the
one
budget,
thing-
we'll talk about that, because we'll talk about fiscal health, how we grow, and making sure that our development regulations lead to a development pattern that is sustainable. And that's another filter that we're adding to this. We've done a report, and if you want to talk about return on investment, really your growth is what pays your bills through property and sales tax. So this is a very minor investment to what we're hoping to develop, and that is accelerate the growth rate, have a better tax base that is diversified beyond just residential. I mean, if we're going to get to some of these goals that growth has to help us meet, it starts with the foundation, and the foundation is our development process, which is where we're about to start.
Ready to make a motion? I'll move that we adopt an amendment to the planning consultant services contract with Freeze and Nichols Incorporated, not to exceed $84,000, which would be an additional $50,000 over the $34,000 that has already been approved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion carries.
I wish this would have been like 5 years ago.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have action item number 7, consideration and action to authorize the mayor to adopt resolution number 2019-063, authorizing execution of an advance funding agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation for a Transportation Alternative Program project.
Good evening, Mayor, City Commissioners. I'm RJ Garza. I'm the Assistant Director for Brownsville Metro. Thanks for being here tonight. This particular project is the Brownsville Metro East Side Transfer Station. I wanted to point out that the yellow area is the area we're talking about that's going to affect this. This grant will improve that particular area, which is the East Side Transfer Station, which consists of bus facility paving, curb and gutter, drainage, a canopy, which is going to be a 3 bus bay canopy, lighting and striping, and also landscaping and irrigation to include a park and ride system right on this other, on the far bottom side, which right now it's a, if you're not familiar with the area, that's right near the airport. It's a 700 Jose Colunga near right and an intersection of Billy Mitchell. So that's our maintenance yard right behind it. That's where all our buses sleep at night. And so this improvement here is, this particular grant is a federal highway grant, which is passed over to TxDOT. And it's separate from the Tiger grant, although it's all inclusive of the Tiger. The other improvements of the Tiger grant will be the rest of the paving, the employee parking lot, the renovation of the fuel system, the fuel island improvements, and things like that. But that's all Tiger grant. This one is just TxDOT highway funds. TxDOT requires a formal commitment by resolution to proceed with authorizing the mayor to enter into a AFA, which is Advanced Funding Agreement with TxDOT for the Transportation Alternatives Program. This was awarded back in February of 2016. We're now at the final stages. TxDOT has put this as high priority, top priority for the city of Brownsville. To move forward, we're asking your permission to allow the mayor to enter into a resolution agreement.
I'll move that we approve the resolution and allow the mayor to proceed.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Nope.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you very
sir.
much.
Next, we have action item number 8, consideration action to award change order number 4 to Spa Glass Contractors, Inc. for the terminal project at Brownsville South Padre Island International Airport in the amount of $218,396.11.
Good evening, Commissioners and Honorable Mayor. We are looking at including electrochromic glass on a couple of surfaces it was not originally included on. We put all the information in your packet. Just looking for approval on this.
Motion to approve?
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, so this is the fourth change order?
This is the fourth change order, yes.
Do you know off the top of your head what the total up through this one in change orders is?
It's been roughly, the initial change order was a reduction of $199,000. The second change order was an administrative change order, which changed some of the construction provisions the FAA requires.
Okay.
And then the third one was an increase of about, I want to say about $60,000. So we're still under the cap of the original authorization the commission gave us. This would take us over that.
A little over.
A little bit.
Because you got that credit back.
Correct. And the funding also for this is a combination mostly of the savings we had from a previous construction project in phase 1. I forget, I'm not sure how much that was. And then any amount that doesn't cover will be covered with PFCs, the passenger facility charge.
And Mr. Walker, what was the purpose of the change? I know you're putting in a different kind of glass, but what's it going to do?
This glass is highly efficient glass. It also tints, so it's controllable. So the more sun that's there, it has sensors, it sees all that. So it'll tint, and it actually lowers It lowers the heating and cooling costs for the terminal.
Okay.
So there's an ROI over a long period. The initial thought of not including it was a short-term savings.
Okay.
So this is going to give us a long-term savings by including it now.
Okay. Is there any way to quantify what the actual savings is going to be long-term because of the type of glass or
It is.
efficiency?
I can send everybody the.
Okay.
the-
It puts us back under the cap.
In other words, it'll pay for itself. It'll pay for itself
It
over.
will. It'll pay for itself.
Okay.
It's something we would pay a lot more for in the future to retrofit it. But
Okay.
additionally, it shows that DFW has put this glass in their terminal, and they've seen a 50% increase in the sales at the concessions because of the dwell time.
And I've seen that in DFW, and when you see it, you wonder, God, what are the cooling costs in this building cost? But it is very efficient, and it makes it so that it's not absurd to be standing next to a window. It really does work.
Right.
So I'm excited to see that technology and something like that that's cost saving is going to be here in our
The
Brownsville.
majority of the terminal already has it.
Yeah.
So we actually downsized the chillers for the building. So we saw an immediate cost savings in construction because of the inclusion in the rest of the terminal. It'll get a return a lot faster on that.
Okay. We had a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have action item number 9, consideration action to approve a variance to the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 82, Solid Waste, Section 82 through 60, variance.
Mayor and Commissioners, requesting a variance to ordinance Chapter 82 solid waste. Reason behind it was there was working on Chapter 82 on the solid waste ordinance to change it up, to update it, make it more understandable. During that time, staff did change the fees for tire disposal itself. And when they changed the fees, they didn't do it with the ordinance approved. The ordinance allows us to do a variance if it's in benefit of the public health issue. So we're asking to go ahead and use the fees that they implemented about a year ago while we work on this to get a master fee schedule to look at the costs using cost models during the budget.
It's reducing the tire fees? Is
The
that
tire
how
the tire disposal going back to what the staff's been kind
What
of.
the recommendation
Yes.
had been, that was
There you go.
never implemented.
That's correct, Commissioner.
What about, right now, we have an amnesty at least once a year, is that right?
We have a tire collection, sir. Yes,
Okay.
but with the PUB utilities, residents are allowed to bring 4 tires based on their utility.
How
so-
often is that?
Once a year.
Okay. Then, does that include any commercial tires at all?
Commercial tires, no, sir.
Okay. I'd like to consider looking at that going forward. Mr.
Okay.
Brennan?
Yeah, that's part of the plan, to look at that. We have tire collections. I will say that the county and the COG both do the same, and they don't have a commercial tire program. There's a grant in place that we're working under that limits that, but we do want to look at that for Brownsville to see how we can potentially offer it as part of tire collections or otherwise.
Okay, thanks.
Michael, and is this to take the price of the tire disposal to previous costs?
Yes, sir. Currently, the ordinance reads it's $200 a ton. The cost is what's been going on for the last about year or so, has been at a lower rate, and the ordinance allows us to use that variance. So we're just doing it, going back to the rate of, and I will look at its passenger vehicle up to 16-inch radius, $1, where if you do a $200 a ton, it's usually about $2.
So it's going to be increased?
It's going to be decreased. It's going to be decreased to where it's operating currently,
Okay.
because the ordinance is a little bit higher.
There was a recommendation made to bring it down, and they started using those prices, but they never officially implemented them. So this is what he's asking us to do today.
Just to really formalize the fees that have been charged for a
Formalize
while.
under the variance, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And how did you arrive at the cost of like $5 per commercial tire?
That we were still in the process of looking at it. That was the number that we put, the $5 just came out, and we were still looking and calculating and doing the cost recovery. And so that's why the numbers were never finalized or brought to the commission, because that was never really done, the cost model. So we're taking these cost model and going back and looking at it.
But then, so you'll find out if that's.
Correct. We'll come back using the proper model of cost recovery or any item behind the best practices or what's in the best benefit of the public. So that's what we'll come back and look at.
I'll make that motion
Okay, we have a motion to.
to approve the variance.
Approve the variance of Code of Ordinances, Chapter 82, Solid Waste. Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Aye. Oh, sorry.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Next, we have action item number 10, consideration action on resolution number 2019-069 to formalize street naming policy for the city of Brownsville.
Honorable Commissioners, what we have before you is a proposed street naming policy. We've never had any kind of formal policy for street renaming. Basically based it on guidelines where we send out notification letters, publicize in the newspaper. And in an effort to create a better process and application, we have this new proposed street naming policy. We established general provisions, procedures, and a standard application. And if you wish, we can also, the new policy also proposes an ad hoc commission committee to kind of look at these cases as they come up. You know, it's not something that happens all the time, but it's something that will come up and, you know. The item before you is what we recommend.
You recommend to approve?
Yes, ma'am.
Motion to approve?
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Lasser, what procedure was used previously for the item we heard earlier today? What was
Yes,
there?
we basically send out letters.
Okay.
Hand-delivered letters to the residents. We also received petitions in favor and against, and we posted in the paper, posted ads in the paper twice.
Did everybody on that block get a notice, or was it?
Yes, we delivered to every resident in the house. If for some reason they didn't receive it or something, I don't know what happened, but we did. We had 2 staff members go by and deliver to every resident or business on that block, on that whole section of the street. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
But did they just deliver, or did they actually stop and explain, and these are the ramifications?
In the places where there were people answered the door, we did explain to them the process. There were some, you know, we tried delivering, but nobody showed up, or nobody opened the door, or nobody, so there were cases where we missed some people, yes.
My confusion was because when it first happened, there were people that opposed it present at the meeting, if I remember correctly, and it passed.
Right.
And so now I see more people, and I just didn't know if they hadn't gotten the, you know,
Yes.
why was it that it snowballed, so.
Yeah.
There was a list of people who actually were for it.
Yeah,
I think
there
I've
was a
seen
very
that.
long list, I
Right.
just don't see any here.
I think there was a few people there was a list, or I'm not sure if there was a list, but,
It was-
but there was some people that had opposed it as well. But, okay, so any other discussion on this? We have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll move to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
All right, stand adjourned.